Hello, one and all. Welcome to Silverline Show on Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim TK, joined as always by Jose Fuentes,
Hello, everybody.
Ron Fortier,
Howdy, all.
and you lovely people in chat. Let's see there. Brent is a little fried after a long day of work, so he is recuperating tonight. And David is still on the road to recovery, so we wish them both a restful night and see them here soon.
Hurry up, Dave. Hurry up.
We miss you.
Right?
Yeah, me too. But tonight we'll be talking about writing versus comics versus novels versus film, and what other mediums we can think of. Talking about what's different, what's similar, what lessons we can learn or take from each one into the other. And Jose can probably give us a little bit of perspective from his own writing career, but as well as from the artist perspective. What do you pull from watching film and TV or reading outside of that, and how does that inform your own visual sense and your own taste when it comes to working in a graphic medium? So yeah, I don't know if we have any housekeeping at the moment.
I think we might be good and caught up on that, right?
No one started a Kickstarter here recently. We haven't found about, right?
No.
Anyway.
I think Ron, do you have anything
Hopefully,
going on?
we will be seeing Beyond the Stars #5 next from Silverline.
Yes.
Once Roland gets it all neat and tidy and ready to launch.
Yeah.
Because the book is finished. We've got the cover by Andrea Bermuda, the artist on the series.
Oh.
And that's what I know as of right now. So
Okay.
just wait to see it happen.
I did a cover.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes.
No spoilers, though. No spoilers yet.
That'll be exciting. And I'm also waiting on possibly seeing whether Soul Ascendant or Dracula hits print first as well. Also, I'm working on some files on the side, so worrying about that. Anyway, so yes, getting into the different mediums. Of course, comics. In my personal opinion, comics are the best medium because it's a graphic medium with an unlimited special effects budget that you can just kind of go hog wild with, and it works with every genre. But sometimes watching a movie or TV is good as well. And I also do enjoy the occasional novel, and I'm currently working on novel number 2. And I got my chops in writing, working in flash fiction on novellas, doing the kind of pulp horror circuit. That was how I first got into writing. So that's a little bit about me. So I'll open up to, we'll grab Ron, what other mediums and genres you've worked in, and then we'll get Jose kind of talk about a little bit what you have dabbled in and what kind of media do you prefer to intake besides, comics, because we all try to read every day.
Well, as far as, obviously, the bulk of my freelance writing has been comics, which was always the goal after I came home from the military and just wanted to get into the comic business. And that was the goal since I was a kid. And I worked, made it happen, and spent almost 35 years just writing that solely. And then over the last 20 years, a little over 20 years, started dabbling in more prose writing, getting into short story writing, and ultimately novel writing and doing adventure, fantasy, science fiction novels. I've pretty much written most genres. There were times I worked for local newspapers doing journalism, column writing. Many, many years ago, I wrote a 3-act play, which a local theater group here, back home in New Hampshire, ultimately produced and put on stage. And that was a ride. I got an opportunity to, see people that I love basically brought back, because the actual play I wrote was a story about how my mom and dad met during World War II. So that was another genre, and that was an experience. That was an amazing experience, working with theater directors and actors and seeing how they go about their process of pulling something together off a page and making it come to life on stage. That was really fantastic. About 4 or 5 years ago, someone on Facebook got a hold of me and mentioned the fact that there was a internet radio program. I'm trying to remember what it was called, Another Wavelength. It was a British outfit radio station, and they were producing short, like Twilight Zone type stories and giving him the whole full production value and all that good stuff, right, with sound effects and actors and whatever. And so they were looking for material, asked me if I had, any kind of a story running from 8 to 10 minutes in length, and ended up, happily the muse kicked in, and I wrote a short thing called Night Army, which got produced. They liked it enough the following year they came back, asked me to write a second one for them. So I pretty much had my finger in most forms of storytelling genre. I mean, I've actually written a few film scripts based on some of my graphic novels. But again, that's not gone anywhere, and I'm not holding my breath.
Writing and getting, I feel like film is entirely another beast, because in order to get started, like it's in comics or in novels, right? Especially novels. If you're a writer, you can be your own like industry arm now. Especially now, you can go through your print on demand, pay for Facebook ads, go through the Amazon Publisher Series, and that way you're essentially in every digital marketplace, paperback, and marketed, and you don't need to leave your chair. Film, you either need to also be a filmographer and shoot it yourself, or you have a lot of really good connections. So I definitely understand that. I've written I've written a film script. I haven't done like any film production myself either. The closest I've gotten is doing a web series, but similar to, I guess, web radio, but
right.
Doing short form video. Yeah. Jose.
I know what you're talking about. These are words I don't understand. I think I've only ever worked in comics. I mean,
Okay.
I am not as evidently well traveled as you guys are in regards to, like, the written word and everything. I like reading books. Does that count?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll get into that, but yeah, because all of it informs your taste, right? Because I feel like a lot of artists get that start because you have that active imagination. So when you're reading, it's very easy for you to picture and visualize what's happening on the page, and then the next step is putting that to pen and paper. And
right.
Now
Well,
you're an
I would
artist,
say definitely that imagination to to be able to pick up a novel, or any novel book, any kind of book and whatnot, and like really you read it. And I know some people can read it and just like zoom through it and remember everything that happened, and I'm like, I don't know how people do that. But when I read it, I do get visuals. Like in my head, I visualize the entire thing, and so
yeah.
I think that plays over into the fact that reason why a lot of my friends have me be their DM storyteller and stuff, because I can visualize that story in my head. You know what I mean? When I go to explain it in detail and whatnot, I don't know, it just comes out, spews forth, because I know words that I'm stumbling them over now, but
Oh yeah, I mean, we talked about DMing right before this actually, but there is that a weird like adrenaline that makes you much more verbose when you are setting the scene. That you're like, all right, we're creating the scenario, we're setting the scene. I'm going to describe like this paragraph for you. and roll for initiative, and knowing that you're about to psychically damage your friends.
Create trauma
with an
for the night.
experience, yeah. But so getting into that ability to visualize, now that you are like a full-time working comics artist, do you find that when you are reading the novel that you can visualize how you would form that on as a panel, or do you also do that like when you're watching a TV show or a film? Do you sometimes have those thoughts like, if I was to turn this into a panel, this is what I would do, or I have like, this looks so cool if I did it this way?
Would I take? Yeah, I absolutely do that. Like, and it's that I think stemmed from art school, because I never really did it before. And then like going through, and when you start going through writing part of school, talking about like the hero's journey and whatnot, like I never really gave that consideration until I started learning about it in class. And then I see it everywhere. Like you start seeing it in every story. Like that's the fundamental basics of this particular story or that story. It didn't matter if it's a fantasy story, sci-fi story, cop drama, buddy cop comedy. It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? It follows the same patterns. And I feel that, like, as an artist, you know what I mean? You see those, you see that scene. Oh, that scene's cool. Like I would want to like put that scene in something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or even if like just listening to it, because I like to do audiobooks.
Yes.
So, you know what I mean? So listening to it, or even or listening to like podcasts of other people playing games and stuff like that, because then I can visualize when they're describing it, I visualize it as well. And so the idea of like putting that to paper, I mean, I'm basically taking, your guys' pretty words, and all I'm doing is just making them, visuals so people can see the prettiness you just described to me. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Like definitely, like, because that comes down to one of like the core principles that gets taught in writing school, which is show, don't tell. And as you become a better writer, you realize that it's actually a little more wishy-washy than that, and you do need to do some telling, because otherwise you're just describing in the words of fellow Oregonian and buddy Ben Piercy, who is writing the new Deadpool series. Check it out. But if you're just writing modern literature, you were describing a teapot, a tea kettle in a window, starting to boil, lightning strikes, a character has an epiphany, and scene ends. And everyone's wondering, like, okay, this was visually interesting, but I don't know what the crap just happened. And so you do need to do some telling, and in novels, that's where you have the internalization, either some little bit where you can actually take time to extrapolate what a character is feeling, what's happening, the processes. You don't necessarily need to like hit the hammer on the head to stay true to the idea of allow the reader to think for themselves, but tie visuals to ideas. Similarly, in comics, that's where you have a lot of external dialogue or captions. Use more captions.
Right.
But yeah, the idea of if a novel is going to be entirely you describing the scene setting up, a comic is great because it allows us to give a rough idea and you create the visual, and then we come back and writing the dialogue and the captions and then tie that back to the idea. So we get this collaborative moment of we can have this visually pretty and striking moment and let that grow and morph on its own, more so than if we were to like just describe it in prose. But we still have the space to tie it back to ideas to make it a fully cohesive idea. And I think that's also why comics, I think, stick so much more for people like us, is because you're creating a fully compelling visual and literary experience at the same go.
Right, which is such a balance to attain. I mean, sincerely, I've known prose writers, I mean, guys who've been like on the New York Times bestseller list, and they can't write a comic to save their soul. It's not going to happen. All right. I think you get an instinct of that media and the storytelling if you're fortunate enough to have grown up reading comic books and taking them in and understanding the process and how it works. The idea, though, basically is there are two basic avenues of what you're going to write in a comic book, obviously. Okay. And the first one is what I call the exposition. which is basically setting up a panel. All right. And the flip side of that is then comes adding the caption or the word balloons. And when I was teaching comic scripting, the thing I would try to get across to most of my students was the fact that working in comics, you have two storytellers. You have the literate storyteller and you have the visual storyteller. And like it or not, the primary storyteller is the visual storyteller. It's your artist. All right. She is the primary storyteller. People buy comic books to look at the art, first of all. Then they read the story. All right. And it works that way. People don't read a comic book without seeing the art, without absorbing it, without saying they like it, they don't like making those mental decisions. So every single word that you write, whether it's in a sentence, a word balloon, or a caption, is going to take space away from that artist. It has to. That's what this is all about. Comics, unlike prose, where you're the guy who sits down and creates what you were talking about earlier, Tim, explaining everything. And I'll get back to that because I think it's one of the biggest weaknesses of bad writers, all right, is how they leave out so much stuff. All right. Again, prose isn't a comic book, and you don't have the luxury of having an artist who's going to give you the visual detailing. But the idea of when writing a comic, script, i.e., captions, word balloons, economy of words. The fewer words you can use, the better. But as you set up each panel, you have exposition. You're telling the artist, this is what should be happening in this particular panel. Go read Watchmen sometime. Go find that script. That exposition can be as long as you want it to be. And what I tell young script writers is, do that. Give your artist a huge exposition. Why? They're not going to use all of it. They're going to use what they believe visually is the most exciting. Give them enough to cut out stuff. All right? I mean, some of the young writers I would get would turn in their weekly assignments of writing like a 5-page script, and there was hardly anything in the exposition, to the point where my critique was, your artist doesn't know what to draw. Give them everything. Then let them do what they do, which is tell the story visually. Now, again, primary, secondary storytellers, but they have to be on the same exact page. They definitely can't be in competition with each other. It's ironic that we're having this discussion this week because I'm sure maybe both of you saw a few days ago, Todd McFarlane opened his mouth and put his foot in it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Come on. That's one of the dumbest things I've ever heard of in my entire life in this business. All right.
I read that and instantly thought about our show tonight.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, dude.
If there is a competition between the writer and artist, trust me, you're just going to be making garbage. They have to be on the same wavelength.
Yeah.
And the goal has to be the exact same thing, which is to make and tell the best story you can. Story has to be king. It has to be your primary goal. Tell a great story. Entertain your readers. And finally, last thing, and I'll let you guys pick up on this afterwards. The flip side of this, when I find writing prose, is I find way too many young writers writing novels or whatever, somehow or other, forget the fact that we humans walk around with 5 senses.
Mm-hmm.
And when they're setting up exposition or whatever, it's like, well, he walked into this house after 2 days of rain, and he saw so-and-so standing in the corner, and blah, 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 and said, hey, let's go, and they walk out. And I'm like, well, what the room smell like? It's been raining for 2 days. Was it moldy? Was it cold? What was the temperature like? What was the atmosphere like? Again, it's like you're alone. You don't have an artist to back you up. All right. Your reader has to feel a part of that scene, of that action. Give them everything you can. That's what you're doing. You're a writer. Paint the picture, but paint all of it. Don't leave out half of it. I mean, a battle sequence, all right, in Conan, stories or whatever. How many times did Robert E. Howard ever say, And man, the stench coming off those bodies was awful. He didn't. Okay, Howard was a great writer. Don't get me wrong. I love the man, all right? And he was a kinetic writer. He had so much energy, it was great. But he was writing so fast and putting everything down so fast, he left out tons of things that could have made his work even better.
Yeah. Well, kind of similarly picking up from that, R.A. Salvatore with the Drist books, which are, if you're the D&D nerds, Conan. But the way that he does, similarly, he does not describe necessarily the body in a moment, but R.A. Salvatore would describe the gleam of the metal as swords crossed, or the spark as a parry, or like the chill wind of like the winter cut through while they're tensing into the guards, right? And to that point, that's a great writing exercise that you kind of alluded to, Ron, is just if everyone's taken a writing 101 class, you've probably done this. If you've done the literature classes, you got the boring version, which is, picture a room and now describe it to the best of your ability, only write descriptions about it. And if you're doing literary stuff, you might get something very intellectual, like imagine a couple that just went through their divorce, now describe the room. And if you go through and like what would happen after this argument, blah, blah, blah. And we're all here because we like men in tights and robots and aliens and all that. So you don't need to do that exercise just for literary elements. You can, imagine that General Zod just crashed down on Earth. Describe the crater.
Right.
Yeah. Similar exercise where now you're working on how do you internalize and visualize these elements that will make this writing compelling. And then we cut that over to working in film, which, film is the entirely visual medium. And also probably the least description to put into the actual Word document, very funnily enough, because you put so much trust into the producer and the director and the costumer and all this stuff. So you're getting these lines that are just Cyclops enters, Cyclops crosses room, dialogue, beat, dialogue, Jean Grey leaves. And you almost have to that was a weird one. That's where
for a fast-paced, narrative page, I could see the description. Because, listen, right at the beginning, at the top of the written page, it's like you're inside the Xavier's mansion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for the artist, he's like Cyclops is walking into the kitchen, blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Then walking into the study. You don't have to be terribly descriptive, I feel, because we all already have a vision in our head of what the Xavier Mansion looks like. I mean, we've seen it in movies, we've seen it in animated, we've seen the need for over detail for a scene like that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really need it because for a fact it's not like we're gonna draw a big old. Well, I've got to draw every little thing inside that room because it's gonna guarantee it's gonna be covered up with dialogue. That when they're inside the mansion, unless they're in the danger room, they're just talking. And I know that kind of sounds like an answer,
there are points when artists, and I'm sure you do this yourself, Jose, and I mean really good artists, okay, who know how to draw, really, at the top of their game, okay, also understand the concept and drama of a story, all right, the beats of it, to the point where you can open up a sequence in a room, a scene, and basically you have full figures, and that artist will probably give you a great deal of detail,
right,
set up the scene. But as it goes along, if all your characters are doing are talking heads and talking, then I see no grief at all with having a panel of a character close up of the head, and you don't see nothing behind it. It's just a blank behind the person's head. You really don't need it. We've established where they're at, and we know what's going on. So, all well and good. Going back to one of the examples I used to use when teaching was that, what you brought up, Tim, that whole idea of what a film director does. And I often think a lot of times when I got that comparison is that basically as a comic book writer, unlike a director, I think you're more like a cinematographer to a degree, or a combination cinematographer editor. All right. Because again, like you said, you can write on the script, all right, hero breaks down the door, runs in, sees the bad guy, runs over, punches him, and unties the girl. They hug and walk out, right? And as I was teaching, my students, if you're going to write that as a script, how many panels are you going to use to get through the door, across the room, punch the bad guy, pick up the girl, and untie her? How many panels are you going to do that?
Well, by that point, it's about pacing.
You can't do a panel of every step he takes to get across the room. You're going to end up with a comic book that's 150 pages long and have just one or two scenes in it. But no, as you're writing the script, you visually have to imagine in your mind, okay, he broke through the door. Now I'll get him halfway through the room. Okay, fine. And again, if you have an artist who knows how to draw sequentials, who knows how to set up a page and composition so that the eye follows where you're going, you don't have to draw every single footstep,
right,
every single motion. So you are what I call spatial editing as you are writing. And believe me, again, like I said, there are many writers who can't do that. At the same time, there are many artists. I've worked with several artists in the past who teach art in colleges, and they've tried to draw comics, and they end up pulling the hair out because they'll read the script, and then the pictures they draw, the panels are so static, it's ridiculous. They just don't get the concept of this panel has to work in conjunction with the one before it, the one that comes after it. There's a magic in comics that's not easy to just pull out of a hat. It's something you have to work at. It's something hopefully you get better as the years go by and you keep doing it. And I like to think hopefully every time I write a new script, I learn something new.
Well, you can be an amazing artist, you know what I mean? Just an amazing painter, amazing illustrator, and not know how to tell a sequential story. You know what I mean? Like, just true to fact. I thank God for the ability to go to art school, go to a comic book specific art school, so I can learn and understand like the concept and the basics of narrative storytelling, sequential storytelling. Because even then, like you guys were talking about the camera or cinematography and whatnot, like we do that either mentally or digitally. You know what I mean, for ourselves as an artist. Like some people, and I have to see it. Some people can just like instantly visualize, oh, it's going to look like this, and this is the angle I'm going to have. This is my perspective. You know what I mean? Grid and everything. I sometimes there are times like, okay, I see it. Let me doodle it out, and then digitally let me move it. Like, which is going to be the better angle? You know what I mean? When I put it down, and that works for me, right? But I wouldn't know or understand that if it wasn't learning sequential art, narrative art. You know what I mean? It's an entirely different bird than just doing illustrations. Like, I don't think I can actually ever do just illustration with just a figure just standing there. You know what I mean? Or static.
That's a whole different science. Like when Rob Davis and I started Airship 27 Productions, we were going to publish novels, right? And one of the things that we wanted to do was, a la our homage to the classic pulps of the 30s and 40s, was have interior illustrations.
Like vignettes?
One page illustrating one scene. And I remember Rob doing the first couple books that we assembled, that we got writers on board and that we published. And I remember Rob and I having phone calls talking about this, because by then he'd been a professional comic book artist for 30, 35 years. And he was like, okay, man, I had to take a step back from this. And I went, okay. He goes, you read the story, and me as the editor would mark off where I wanted a particular scene as that one page spot illustration, then go another 30, 40 pages and another. And he said, it's like trying to capture everything that happened in that scene in one illustration alone. That's a spot illustration. And trust me, it takes a whole entirely different creativity to make that work, as well as drawing.
Like, which scene am I going to capture? Which scene am I going to grab to visually stimulate the eye to move it on to the next? Like, oh man, I got to keep going. I got to know what. There's a lot to it. And like I said, I am not that kind of illustrator. Like, I'm not. Rob is a master. I don't care what people say.
If if you're designing a book, all right, if you're designing a book and you know you're going to have 8 illustrations in the book, right? I early on realized as the editor, all right, there's no way I can just give the manuscript after I've read and edited it to the illustrator and say, okay, give me 8 illustrations. Because what I would ultimately find out is my artist will want to give me an illustration on page 5, an illustration on page 10, an illustration, and then go 100 pages without an illustration. So basically, I had to say, okay, there's going to be 8 illustrations, and mathematically figure out throughout the book where each of those illustrations had to appear, because I'm designing the entire package, not only the covers, but the inside. So you have a balance. And I'd send the manuscript. Well, nothing happens in the scene that you underlined. They're just talking. And I'm like, yeah, well, isn't that the challenge? Give me an illustration that looks really great and dynamic, but it's just 2 figures talking. I can't just pick out all the action sequences and have all the illustrations in one half of the book. So any kind of storytelling you do, whether it's comic books, spot illustration, I mean, even the people who do advertising and marketing guys, all right, every ad you see has to have a story in it.
Absolutely.
You're trying to sell something, so there should be a story, even if it's only one illustration and the product. But you want to make it dynamic. You want, get across to your, prospective consumer, okay, this will make you feel good, or this will make your car run better, or this is something your family will enjoy, or whatever. And man, that challenge is really rough, especially in a market today where you're buying against all kinds of competition.
Yeah, that's looking of opinion on something that I think, like, lessons that I kind of had to deal with starting out in writing is the issue of pacing, but also the issue of understanding where the movement happens, where the reader is not seeing, right? The idea of what movement is happening off panel.
Yeah.
And kind of getting like that holistic view, and that also applies to the issue as a whole and the issue as a volume, or if you're working in prose, like what is happening in between the scenes in the chapter and what's happening between chapters in the book. And this is like a lesson I think can be learned very well by watching very good episodic television or by reading very good periodic comics, is understanding that it's all part of a grander narrative, but still your individual chapters, individual pages should have almost kind of a beginning, middle, and end to drive the movement through it. Is that something that, as every writer who's very early on and who's experienced knows, is that the second act is where everyone kind of loses all sense of what they're doing. Right. And you start muddling about for a little bit. It's very exciting when you're starting an idea. It's very exciting when you're ending something, but the getting there is the boring part. However, when you look at something like The Lord of the Rings, which is a 3-book epic on the act of getting somewhere else, it's a book about walking, and very good movies. However, we don't actually see a whole lot of time of just them walking. If they are walking, they're also setting up something else, which is because Tolkien understood that we don't necessarily care about the how they're getting there. We care about the why they need to go there, what's stopping them from going there, and what happens once they get there. And so, you can have a walking scene, but the walking is establishing the why of what's happening, why you're going to this, or it's going to be introducing a roadblock, and it's the stopping us from getting there. Now it's a butt beat, a beat that's a butt, and it's your butt, therefore arc. Every beat should be but or therefore from the one before it. It sounds weird when you take it out of context.
Right. No, right. Yeah.
Or your therefores. And so when you're looking at your comic, it's okay, I'm going from panels 1 through 5 on this. Panel 1 on this page is going to be the why we need to do this. Panels 2 and 3 are going to be a but and then a resolution, and then 4 and 5 are going to be the therefore, right? And so understanding of there's still like a miniature arc happening on this page that is going to keep them engaged and want them to turn. The Absolute books do a wonderful job with that. You're constantly seeing something like, okay, we need to do this. Someone gets punched in the face, therefore this thing gets dropped. Okay, we need to do this now. Someone that gets kicked through a window. Okay, well, and so very dramatic, but it's you're building this curve that narrates you through. Similar to DMing, right? Jose, which is Nolan wants you to DM a montage of them walking. They want to know what encounter are we getting to?
That's right.
And so what is the visual descriptions happening? What do we see while we're moving here? And then what do we hear in the distance that's the omen of what's coming?
Right. Nobody wants a 3-hour game of like, all right, and you guys have walked 20 miles and you come to a crossroad. Which way are you going? We're going to turn left. All right, you turn left. The wind is blowing in your face and you continue walking. 2 hours later, you're still walking. Nobody wants to know the drive there.
Yeah.
They want to know the interruptions in the middle or what happens at the destination.
Yeah, exactly.
I always get a kick out of, especially using Lord of the Rings as an example for this. When you watch those films, all right, it's really, really keen to see Peter Jackson's use of camera work, yes. Especially when, okay, so what's going to happen now? Oh, well, we've ended, this action sequence or this dramatic sequence or whatever. Oh, it's time to move again. It's time to walk again. And he takes you from this intimate, you're right in there with the group of guys, all right, the elves and everybody else. But then the very next scene is you're up like in a helicopter because he's filming it from above, right? So like it's so powerful because they're walking over these mountains, right? And there's this long, quest they're walking on, whatever. And that just goes on for like about 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden, boom, we're back down to the crossroads. Here we are. There's a monster and whatever. So it's like all the intimate stuff is right up front and close and personal. All the walking between the scenes, up in the helicopter, dramatic scene, because it's got to be walking with power and drama.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to show the immenseness of the distance that they're going.
Not forget the music score.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? The music score. I mean, one of the greatest scores that ever did that, which is basically, let's take a moving scene, which is nothing but dullness most of the time in any story you tell, and hype it up. And that was The Magnificent Seven. All right, you get the first half hour of that movie taking place in this little town with these Mexican peasants coming to recruit these gunslingers, right? Yul Brynner, Steve McQueen, all these guys to come help them fight the banditos, all right? And it's just there's a couple of action sequences. Don't get me wrong. There's one great opening action sequence where they're riding shotgun on a funeral, bringing this guy to Boot Hill. Okay, all well and good. But then we get into that, okay, here come the Mexicans trying to recruit gunfighters with Yul Brynner. So ultimately, he has his 6 guys, so now there's 7. He does this, this little thing about, now we're 7. And they get on their horses. Well, up until now, Elmer Bernstein's music has been low-key, just in the background. You hardly even know it's there. Now they're on their horseback, and they're riding to the Mexican village. There's nothing exciting about riding through the forest, the creeks. But what do we get? Dun, 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 the Marlboro Man music, all right? Carrying across the theater. I mean, you can be half asleep watching that movie, and all of a sudden you sit up and go, what's happening? Oh, they're riding.
Right.
Okay, yeah, they're riding. There are tricks, filmmakers use, all right, that takes what's really just dull, boring scenes and make you feel like something huge is happening.
Yeah. There's also like kind of implying hitting this and like the counter strict to this of intentionally using a dull scene or an empty space. I forgot what Kurosawa has a term for it. I forgot what it's called, but essentially it means like empty scene. And it's the same thing that happened like in Seven Samurai, where we stop everything's happening and just see the village in rainfall for a little bit. And if you're like telling a traditional action story, you might think, okay, well maybe we just cut this and move on. But the idea is that you're using this to create a why, and this is we've created now the scene that sets the absence of violence. So when the fight happens in the next scene over, you are now hit with this is why the violence is what we're trying to avoid or trying to stop. You're setting this this moment of emptiness to counteract this moment of hyperviolence. But you don't see necessarily the transition from rainfall and nothingness to people getting up and arming and then going and standing in battle lines. It's you even if you're using those empty scenes, like the moment of them riding through town, or as moment of the rainfall before village, you use that to set up directly into something. You don't necessarily lose track of what you want to lose track of what's happening between the panels, because you're creating that space and allowing the reader to, or the viewer to, understand that motion that's going between them and keep the emotional intensity from one scene into the next. That was something that I struggled with when I first got started writing, was the feeling like I needed to describe every single action all the time, going from each location and all the travel. And
the third cactus.
The third cactus. That was something I picked up from, particularly like writing short fiction will beat that out of you, but also then working a web series and short form film, short form visual media, really you understand the economy of scenes in a story, and then translate directly into comics. You have an economy of panels on a page and so many pages in a floppy that you really understand how much motion you can tuck behind the panels to allow each thing to stand on its own and be as emotionally intentional as you need it to be.
So say, as an artist, we want everything that we draw on a panel, on a page, to have an intentional, specific purpose. And then we forget the dialogue still has to go in there. I say that to say, for when the story, when you're getting the script, or writing the story, going transitioning, like from this scene into this one, you want, like you said, you want your momentum to carry. You want the momentum to carry on. Even in like reading a book, like say the party splits up, which, by the way, gamers, never split the party, rule number 1. But even if the party splits up, you are going to be as descriptive you can, describing the scene and the situation this end of the party is going to, and then you transition to the next end, right? And you don't want to lose a delay. In the reading, you want to flow right into it, right? And artistically, you want to do that as well. And when you oversaturate a panel to panel in regard, like when the story breaks into another section of the story, you don't want to lose what you're gonna put in there. Like, you know what I mean? You overdo it artistically. You will read the book. You will read your book when you're done, and you're like, oh, like that was supposed to be like artistic. That's supposed to be what, like, it's supposed to set the hook into the next spot, and it got covered with dialogue. And you should think better. Like, you have to take that into consideration. I say you should think better, but artistically, you have to take that shift from, like, one part of the story hooked into the other one. You have to take that into consideration when you're doing your narratives as well.
Yeah, that's also something that as a writer you also need to be mindful of, is how many panels are you trying to pack onto this page if you're doing it full script style, and enough to hit that arc of that you're trying to do, but not so much that you're forcing the artist to essentially do a full page of thumbnails. Yeah.
Like I've asked, like, hey, can I just combine these 2 pages? Because I know that what you're trying to say, but it's kind of doing it twice. Can I combine it and then stretch this panel out?
As writers, as being the guys who kick off the entire process, all right, it's like, as you have this idea, and you might write it or jot it down someplace for what an issue is going to be like for a floppy, and then you start writing, and you start juggling things. I mean, really, extremely, because every page you finish is a page closer to the end of that issue, right? And so whether you want to have it up front or subconsciously in your back, there's always that thought, okay, well, I've got to get to this point where I need a cliffhanger ending, all right? And I have found, and this is only because of my personal love of the media, all right, and my respect for what artists do, and the fact that I love their artwork so much, is that I've adopted that 5-panel, 6-panel rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
My scripts are 5-panel, 6-panel, 5-panel, 6-panel, 5-panel, 5-panel, 5, 4-panel, but never beyond 6, ever. All right. And I have found that adapting that particular formula for how I write works, because I'll basically, start with a 6-panel page, which will have a little bit more story than a 5-panel page. Fine. 5-panel page, 4-panel pages can give me tons of action. And then when I want to get back to story, all right, to narrative, I can go back to 6-panel. If there's this, again, to me, once I start, in the past, I wrote that when I was starting my career, all right, I would write 7-panel pages or whatever, right? And I just found totally inhibited by it, totally like handcuffed, all right? And the realization that I was like crimping what the art should be telling the story. I was like stepping where I didn't need to be. If I could definitely dissect and lay out a narrative and a pace that worked. And that's when invariably fell back to that 5-6 panel thing. Again, you need to tell the story. You're aware every time you write a single page, you attack it, try to make it, as good as that page can be, but to the point where it leads to the next page, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Always in the back of your mind. And here we go. 19. Okay, here comes 20. Here comes 21. Here comes 22. And that's when that juggling of panels is huge to me, because it's like, how powerful do I want to make my ending? How much do I want to leave the reader with, huh? What's going to happen next? Okay, and that will ultimately determine how many panels are on that last page. If I can get away with 2 panels or a full panel blowout, to be continued, man, to me, that's nirvana, all right? And I know the artists love that stuff, all right? Because then they can draw something powerful and evocative, all right? And really get the reader, by now, reeling them in, hook them with the story, pull them in. They can't wait to see the next issue. Yeah. But that's a lot of stuff to put in your mind.
Well, yeah, I mean, as much as like from a like I said, artistic point of view, there's a lot of factors that we have to like keep in our brain while we're working on something, while we're laying out panels. Like I keep the script next to me, like almost like right next to my board, right next to my iPad. You know what I mean? So that I can keep going back and forth. Like, okay, this many panels laid out like this. What is this saying? Okay, I can tweak this up. I can change it up. But like still, like my goal is always to follow the panel setup that the writer has given me. But if I have to tweak it up a little bit, I will. But I rather not. Ideally, your writer has set the pacing. You know what I mean? The way it needs to be. You just have to help hit those same beats to keep that keep that moving, right?
And honestly, I mean, over the years, there have been quite a few times with artists that I've worked with, after having read one of my scripts and done, rough thumbnails, and they start working on it, I'll get an email, back, halfway as they're working on a script and saying, I can do this in 4 panels, Ron. It'd be a heck of a lot better than those 5 you have. Go for it. Yeah. Totally go for it. Or the flip side, if I've got like 5 panels, and hey, Ron, I really need a 6th panel because I want to tie these 2 in the middle, with this little, go for it. Again, all right? It's like I'm laying down skeletons.
Excuse me.
Right? And that's the way I look at comic writing. I am laying down bare bones skeletons of the story, all right? The artist is going to flesh it out. She is definitely going to flesh it out. The sinews, the muscles, the drama, the suspense, everything else. And they're visual storytellers. So if there's something in the script that's weak that they can shore up, again, we go back to what's the goal?
Right.
Why are we working on this? All right. If they're not giving me their ideas and saying, well, this is all right, Ron did it. No, it's not what I want from a partner. All right. I mean, I basically And I tell this to new people that I work with for the very first time ever. If there's something that I can do better in the script, you have to let me know. If there's something you see that you'd like to do better in the script, in the story, you have to let me know.
Right.
All right, because we're partners. We're both together trying to tell a story.
Well, that's a key point too. Like you just said, partners. It's
right.
It may not be a business partnership, but it is a partnership to create a story. To the best of your abilities.
If my story doesn't excite the artist, we're dead in the water right off the bat. We're not going anywhere. Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, what happens, and thank you, Lord, thank you. Most of the great artists I've worked with, I see the artwork come back during the process, and it does the same thing to me. It just reinvigorates me to say, "Damn, this is good. I gotta up my game. I gotta make this story even better because look at what this artist is doing to this humble little story that I gave them." Okay, so yeah, it's like a ping pong match. I'm going to inspire you, but you got to inspire me.
Right.
Boom, boom, boom. The way you go. And hopefully the end result of that is you make a hell of a lot of happy comic book readers.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that was something that I got tested on writing Dracula 1 because I wanted to say the way where Dracula was being as close to the source material, like not just like emotionally and like spiritually, but also like content wise in the first issue, because that that's part of the buy-in. That's what makes it unique, is the fact that like it's not the Hollywood Dracula, but then also old English writers are very good about going on for a long time about random stuff. And the first act of Dracula, it has been turned into entire movies just in that first act, and that's just Harker escaping the castle. And there's 3/4 of a book after that. So I probably should have reached for 5 issues. But so the first issue definitely had no too many panels, but then going forward, like issue 2, I'm like, okay, we're just doing the spirit of the book, not necessarily all the same content, and we can abbreviate from there. But yeah, what I like doing, because I do also try sticking at 5, 6. Usually what I do is I aim for 4, and that means I'll end with 6. But if I know that I'm gonna have like a 7, 8, or if I'm going to do a 10-page panel, it's gonna be very intentional. It's gonna be very weird, and that might be something where like Jose gets a note in the script. I'm like, okay, we're doing this in the style of scales on the back of a snake, and then each panel is just like a face here, a hand here, a knife there. Just
told you, I know a guy that did, was it a 16, 20 panel page, but it was intentionally meant to do that because it was to show the superhero coming down a flight of stairs, right? And then about a little over halfway through, it shows him running back up the stairs because it was in the one panel, like, was it panel 8, had the women's and men's bathroom signs. And he was coming back up to the bathroom. You know what I mean? It was an intentional part of the story, was to, kind of break up the levity, or break up the, before it breaks into, the action, we're going to throw a little bit of comedy in there. Right. And like, even when he's like, bro, look at all these panels on this page. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why? Why? Like, I don't see any comic book page ever do that. Like, why would you do that? Oh, dude, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. Sure enough, it was actually pretty good. Yeah. Like, it was just funny because by the time you got like, oh, dude, this dude, it's funny. You know what I mean? It was pretty funny. And it definitely created a breather before, door opens up and it's time for action. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's understanding that's intentionality behind it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I just had it out and I put it back, but yeah, the most recent Absolute Wonder Woman also had a high panel count page, but it was done in the style of what's it called? But the style of like Greek pottery, where you have like all the illustration along the inside, the tiles.
Right.
So it's all tiled alongside the thing, and I'm like, oh, that's very cool, actually.
Yeah.
But also, then they don't have a whole lot of dialogue on that page to let the art breathe. Whereas if you're writing something like TV or film, you might be able to do monologue or exposition over the top. but
right.
that's probably
Batwoman,
what they're afraid of.
Batwoman, like New 52 Batwoman had a lot of like off the wall abstract paneling.
Yeah.
Like the bat symbol and the bat symbol and like the surrounding area around it all was like that was a different panel and stuff like that. Hi, Billy.
Yeah, I mean, everything we've talked about, so far. I mean, there's no set, fast rule. All right. I mean,
Right.
basically, these are fundamentals that we've worked with, that we've known, we've become comfortable with, and a majority of creators do that as their careers, expand. But never be afraid to try something new. Never be afraid to challenge yourself creatively. All right, artistically, literary, whatever. Okay, it's part of the fun of what you do. And as I was saying, hopefully, there's never a point where you've reached that point where, oh, that's the best I can do. I can't do any better. That's wrong. That's just wrong-headed and wrong thinking. Right? There's more to learn. There's always more to learn.
Yes.
And you only do that by working and having the guts to step out on that limb and say, I'm going to try something. Here we go.
See, like I said, in art school, we were told, like, hey, if someone asks you if you could draw something, you tell them yes. Like, you may not know how to draw it right now, but you basically locked yourself in to learn how to do it and figure it out, right?
Jose, that was my wife in San Diego when I got off writing Terminator and didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, all right? Her slapping me across that hotel room. Why'd you come to this con in the first place? You said you were a writer, and writers write. Never mind what, you write. She was right.
Right.
She was right. All right. Things could have gone a whole different way for me, all right? But yeah, it was just that simple, basic fact. If you want to work in this business, in this industry, as an artist, as a writer, as a colorist, as a letterer, you don't turn down work. All right. This is your dream. You make it come true. You say, yeah, I'm going to do this.
I'll tell you, like, same with my wife, like, we'll be like, hey, have you talked to anybody today? I was like, no. Like, I'm at the table working, lady. What are you talking about? Like, I know this person's there. You need to go talk to them. You talked about possibly talking to them. Like, yeah, but go do it. Man, you're not here looking at me. And then I'll get another text like, go do it. Like, okay. And every time it has been a benefit that I've done it. And that, like I said, that truly stems from like my insecurities of talking to people at conventions. I really like doing conventions. I just did one. I did Galacticon, right? And I knew pretty much everybody that was there, like all the creators that were there. But there was Joe Doyle. I hadn't really talked to Joe Doyle before. And so like I actually like got up and talked to him. Like he came and talked to me for like a quick second before people came to his table. But I got up and talked to him. Like it's not hard until it is, or it's hard until it isn't. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like talking to people, that's rough for me. Always has been. I've gotten better in the years that I've been, a professional comic creator, doing conventions and whatnot. But it's taking risk. It's taking risk to go out and talk to someone. It's taking risk to, to put yourself out there like, oh yeah, I can do that. No clue how to do that, but I can do that. No problem. Yeah. And then you figure it out. You learn. You doodle it. You rough it out. You piece it together and figure out, oh yeah, you know what? I really can do that. That makes sense to me. To doing a panel like, oh, when it's like this many panels, this many panels on a page, this many panels on a page, the storyline's progressing across this. Can I do it like that? Like, I think I can. Like, you get to that point where you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. Like, that makes sense. And I have a slew of comic books next to me, right? So like, I don't think it's a bad thing. It's like, what did this person do? What did Joe Mad do? How did he lay out his panels for this particular story? I know it's not the exact same thing, whatever, but how did he lay out a story for this transition? How did, you know what I mean? I can't even tell you all the people I have next to me, but like how did this artist do it? How did this artist, and then just go through, like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I understand. Like, oh, I didn't think about turning it that way. All right, put that aside and start working. You know what I mean? Figure it out, piece it together. You can do it. I know you can do it. I know I can do it. I just have to have the confidence to do so. And thank the Lord I got my wife to help remind me of that.
Okay, well, this has been That's One Show on Tuesday. We'll be back next week with a topic that I need to stop closing my calendar.
I don't actually have it open this time.
Yeah, next week we are talking about. We'll have John Holland on as a guest.
Oh, that's right.
Yes, yeah. So we'll be talking with John Holland, who has worked with many publishers such as Fantagraphics and our current, I believe, our current distribution partner, Antarctica Press. And so we'll be talking all about creating comics with him, some of the business side stuff. And it overall seems like a very cool dude, so I'm excited for it. And so make sure to check out next week's show at 8 p.m. Pacific time, and make sure to check out Wednesday Wham and Silver Sunday on their respective days as well. The Sunday you're having Philip Russert on as a guest. So we'll see you then, and we hope you all have a great week. But until next time,
As ever,
right? Make mine Silverline.
Silverline.
Hey, this is Paul Pelletier. Make mine Silverline. Is that okay, Roland?